Yes, thank you, David, for coming tonight. And you are, I believe, the Director of Project Development at the solar energy company, US Solar. And their mission is to make solar energy accessible with simple solutions that are good for folks, counties, especially financially, and great for our environment and our health. So for example, I mean, I don't think there's anyone that's going to debate that fossil fuels have a horrific effect on the climate, our health. I mean, we cannot continue to use fossil fuels. It's just, it just, you know, we won't be here. Our children will not have an earth if we don't change. It's quite that critical. So, for example, a single 6-acre, 1 megawatt solar farm provides energy for 200 homes a year. But more importantly, it prevents almost 2 million pounds of coal from being burned. And that is greenhouse gas emissions. Those are, I mean, that's toxic stuff. And that's just 200 homes. But solar has other benefits, tax revenue. You know, both any of the production that's done, there's tax revenue that's generated. Jobs. This is a new industry, and solar is, if you look it up, solar is one of the highest paying jobs in energy. So great jobs. And farmers lease the land, so they get money for the leased land, and they also share in the energy production revenue. So this is quite lucrative for farmers. And I think that I know John's on the township and I'm at our township, and that's something that farmers don't quite understand, that this is a really good revenue opportunity for them. So that is a reliable source of income, and it's, you know, great for our health. And you know, I can't really find anything. The things that the county's coming back with are that solar farms are ugly, so they want to put shields around them. Yet I live quite close to a feedlot, and believe me, I'd much rather have a solar farm than a feedlot. And it's just goofy stuff like that, and wanting a huge amount of money in a surety to take down those solar panels when supposedly they're no longer effective, which could be 50 years. And they want to hold on to that money. They don't only want to hold on to it, but they want it paid up front. Solar companies are new companies. And to say, we're going to give you $100,000 or more, because that's just entry-level money, one lump sum, is almost making it impossible for solar to exist in Wright County. And this is only my opinion, so I might be totally wrong, but I'm getting really frustrated. I have not missed one solar meeting, either planning or with commissioners or anything. And the commissioners always complain that, well, people think we're against solar, but we're not. Well, if they're not showing any cooperation with the solar companies. It's a very adversarial situation. And I think unless we get involved and we start calling our commissioners and we start writing editorials and we start saying we want solar, I don't know that solar energy actually, I mean, David can correct me if I'm wrong, but I worry about solar energy actually being able to be implemented in Wright County. So now you might be thinking about the state, if you've gone by those huge solar gardens. A lot of those are state gardens. So the state can come into any county and say, we want to have a solar garden here for Excel Energy in Hennepin County. And I think that they can just do that because they have some sort of state way of being able to do that, to get that permissioning without having to work with commissioners or anybody in Wright County. But for private solar to be used in this county, we've got to work with small solar companies or new solar companies, which David is with US Solar. And we're making it pretty darn hard in my eyes. So with David, I so appreciate you being here, and you can, you know, tone down my rhetoric if you'd like, but I'm getting pretty frustrated.
Well, yeah, Lori, thanks for a bit of an introduction there. And, you know, it is my job to make sure that I don't let my anger show, but I feel it just the same as you do. So really quickly, just to Here, I'm actually going to share my screen if that's all right. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Mhm.
Get a little presentation. Okay, so
Yeah.
so first up, just want to walk through the quick agenda. Try to keep it a little bit short because Laura did a great job at some basic overview, but things I want to cover quickly: who is U.S. Solar? What is community solar? Why should you care? Myths versus facts, and then Wright County's solar moratorium and what you could do to help. So the first thing, sorry, let me, oops. The first thing is who is US Solar? And as Lori said, we work with counties, cities, schools, residents, and businesses to help them save money on their electricity costs. And we do that through developing community solar gardens. So we are headquartered in Minnesota, and about 95% of our business is in Minnesota. So what is community solar? Here's a picture that we took at one of our projects. This one's over by North Branch, Minnesota. And community solar, simply put, is a program that allows for electricity customers in one place to benefit from a solar project located somewhere else. So unlike how solar historically has worked, you don't have to put any solar panels on your rooftop or on your own property in the ground or whatever to actually benefit from this project. You can go solar by simply subscribing to a solar project that is community based. So up to 200 residents can subscribe to a single solar garden, and then they save on their electricity costs. So, just I guess the quick pitch here, just so you guys fully understand it. If I was talking to an Xcel Energy electric customer specifically, because currently they're the ones who can benefit from this, what I'd tell you is that right now, a lot of the money that you spend on your electricity cost to Xcel actually goes to importing and burning fossil fuels. And community solar gives you, the homeowner, or even a renter, or the local schools or cities or businesses, a way to go solar by subscribing to that community-based project. By doing so, you save money on your electric bills and you support clean energy without any upfront cost or any equipment on your property. So it's just the easiest way to go solar. As a side note, if you are an Xcel Energy customer and you want to do this, you can right now today. You just go to us-solar.com, go to the Minnesota page and check it out. I'd encourage you to do it maybe after the presentation though, just in case you have questions or want to learn more about it. So, oh, thanks for throwing that in the chat. So why should you care about community solar? Lori talked about some of the people that benefit already. So obviously the subscribers, like, the school districts and cities that we work with, Becker's schools, City of Big Lake, these are some of our subscribers that are kind of nearby. In terms of, the landowners that we worked with, I find maybe the best way to explain this is by just giving you an example. So I started working with a landowner named Denny in 2017. He had always planned to give his farmland to his kids when he passed away. But his kids had some concerns about whether or not they would be able to make ends meet through farming alone. And they didn't really want to have to take an additional job while continuing to farm. And they were really just totally against selling that farm for a residential subdivision or some kind of industrial complex. So then Denny got something in the mail from us. He heard that we would be able to lease a small portion of his farmland, about 6 to 8 acres, and then pay him several times the market lease rate. And then on top of that, this income is fixed and totally predictable, unlike crop prices with, farming input costs and weather and all that. So Denny and his kids decided that they would do that, and they would have that sort of financial stability from the solar income, where even if there was bad weather or bad crop prices, they'd still be able to keep that farmland in the family. And fortunately, Denny's still kicking. He doesn't have to worry, though, that whenever the time comes to pass that land on to his kids, he'll be giving them a more stable financial future and allowing them to continue in the tradition of farming. again, economic development, we increase tax revenue, we pay legal fees, recording fees, application fees. We're actually investing in terms of capital investment per project. It's about $2 million within, hopefully within the county. And then, of course, the local good paying jobs, construction workers, vegetation experts, engineers, surveyors, consultants, all that kind of stuff. And because we interconnect our projects at the distribution level, the energy is actually getting used in the local area. We're not just shipping this off to Iowa or South Dakota on those big transmission lines, just the regular wooden power lines that are called distribution lines that, are feeding the nearest houses. That's who actually receives the electricity. And we pay oftentimes more than $150,000 to upgrade Xcel's aging infrastructure as part of this, as part of each project. And energy independence, we also, why would we want to import fossil fuels when the sun is just constantly replenishing our supply of energy in Minnesota? And the local solar keeps our money in the local economy. And then in terms of the local environment, this is really one of the biggest ones. We are decreasing stormwater runoff by 23% compared to row crops due to the area underneath the panels being converted into pollinator-friendly habitat. So we plant the whole project area in these native grasses and pollinator flowers and stuff like that. That also, we don't emit any air pollution or require water to operate, unlike pretty much every other type of energy except wind. And then finally, the sort of obvious one is the global environment. As Lori mentioned, a single 6-acre project can provide 200 homes per year worth of electricity and save almost 2 million pounds of coal from being burned. I got a question in the chat, who funds the project? So the way that we receive our income, US Solar, the way that we make money is on subscription payments. So take the Becker schools, for example. Actually, let's take my own house, because I'm a subscriber. My residence is a subscriber, and it's a little easier. So typically I pay about $100 a month to Xcel. I don't use that much electricity, but now after I've subscribed, I pay approximately $0 per month to Xcel. Sometimes it's $10, sometimes it's -10. And then I also pay a bill to US Solar on a monthly basis. But the bill to US Solar is less than the credit I'm getting on my Xcel bill. So in other words, my bill that used to be $100 is now $0. And in addition, I pay an $80 bill to US Solar. So every month I save $20 or 20%. And I don't have any equipment on my property, no upfront costs. So, but that $80 payment, my subscription payment, and all of the other residents who are doing this, their subscription payments, and the school districts and the cities and everybody else that's participating, all of those subscription payments collectively is how we make money. And as long as those subscription payments is greater than the cost of installing the project, then we profit. And so in terms of funding it, US Solar is, we self-finance our projects. But then we do work with financing institutions. US Bank, for example, is a financing party that we've used. Did that answer the question? Yeah, and feel free to throw anything in the chat or even just interrupt me if you have questions. We'll try to answer them in real time. And then I can also take questions at the end, whatever works better for you. Okay, so moving on from why you should care, hopefully you're convinced this is a great thing for the county. I wanted to quickly go through some myths versus fact. So first myth, we hear this a lot, is that solar harms nearby property values. And maybe I should back up for a second and just say that certain people have decided that they will oppose solar, whether that's for political reasons or that they're, scared of change, or they heard something, about it on a certain news channel or whatever, oftentimes they've already had their mind made up, and then they're kind of working backward to try to find a good reason to oppose the project. So this is one of those that we see thrown around. Some concerns about solar are valid and misunderstandings, and we can educate. And then other concerns are simply excuses to oppose the projects. So yeah, first myth is that they harm property values. I'm just going to summarize for you here. All available data finds that there's no negative impact to property values of residential homes or agricultural land adjacent to or near a solar array. So this has been, here's 3 studies. The first one looks at 23 different states, 37 different appraisers only a few years ago. I've also linked to a local study that was done by the Chisago County assessor. None of these studies find any negative impact on these property values. And they're looking at solar projects, huge solar projects, sometimes 100 acres or 1,000 acres that are within 150 feet of a home. So they're way more imposing than any of the solar projects that we're talking about. And even those imposing projects did not create a negative impact on nearby property values. Another myth would be that solar panels will be worthless in 10 years or so. Well, so I could talk about this for a long time. Maybe I'll give you the short version, and then if anyone is confused or wants to dive deeper, we can. But the first thing to understand about solar, let's see, wait, I've got a question in the chat. So to what degree do the companies profiting from dirty energy or fossil fuels, do they fight policies that would allow for green energy? Yeah, so without getting into any specific individuals or families, I would just say that the biggest lobbyist in the state of Minnesota is Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy, while they are certainly compared to other electric utilities in the country, they are actually doing a very good job at setting aggressive renewable energy goals and trying to fight climate change. However, they are often our opposition when we're trying to pass policies that would expand this community solar program. And they're very entrenched in politics. I mean, oil and gas companies have been the biggest lobbyists around the country for many, many decades. So it's a very real problem. Currently, Minnesota has laws in place that allow for community solar and the type of projects that I'm talking about. But certainly we continue to fight for more aggressive policy or deregulating of clean energy. And that is a serious headwind, those companies. So I'm going to dive into the topic of solar panels will be worthless in about 10 years. So the first thing that's critical to understand is that solar panels, you can't compare them to an iPhone or a car or a computer because they don't need to be sexy, right? Solar panels just produce a commodity. Okay, so they produce a kilowatt hour, and the value of a solar panel is going to be equal to the value of a kilowatt hour multiplied by however many kilowatt hours that solar panel produces. So today, solar panels are warranted to produce at least 80% of their day one output by year 30. In other words, the worst case scenario over a 30-year period is that the amount of energy that these things can produce goes down by just 20% as worst case scenario. So imagine you bought a magic machine that produced a different commodity. Imagine you bought this machine and it just produced tens of thousands of gallons of gasoline. So over time, let's say that production decreases to 80%. In other words, it decreases by 20%, just like the solar panels. In year one, let's say it produces 100,000 gallons of gasoline. Okay, in year 30, now it only produces 80,000 gallons of gasoline. And if the price of gasoline in 30 years is $3.50 per gallon, well, then that machine would create $280,000 of value in year 30. So in year 30, if you didn't want that magic machine anymore, you would just resell it. You wouldn't have to take it to a landfill. You wouldn't have to bury it in the ground or anything crazy like that. And this is just like the solar panels. So even if their production decreases slightly, the solar panels will still have value as long as they produce kilowatt hours and as long as kilowatt hours have value in the open market. So, if a project were to be decommissioned in, say, 30 years, 25 years, or 50 years or 100 years, it's likely that these solar panels would be sold on the open market to anybody that wants clean energy. Think about like a resident or a local business. So I included an example here. So today you can buy 500-watt solar panels. So let's say that we build a solar garden with 500-watt solar panels, and it's decommissioned in 30 years. At that point, each solar panel would have decreased by 20% in terms of its capacity. So now they would all be roughly equal to 400-watt solar panels. Okay, so let's say that a local manufacturing facility in Wright County comes along and they want to put some solar on their rooftop. They want a 1,000 kilowatt rooftop system to power their own operations. So their choices would be they could purchase 500-watt solar panels, brand new. They'd need about 2,000 of them. And another option would be to purchase used solar panels that have that effective capacity of 400 watts each rather than 500. So if they bought the 400 watts, they would need 20% more. So you can see here, these are kind of their two options. They could buy all of these brand new ones. Just for your reference today, that would cost about $450,000. Or if they wanted to buy them used, let's say that the person selling them, like the developer, charged $300,000. Well, if your total production is going to be the same between these two systems, and one is $150,000 cheaper, you're probably going to go with option B. So that's the sort of concrete example to walk through why solar panels would have value even after a project could be decommissioned. You may buy a few more solar panels, but as long as the total cost is less than buying brand new, you're going to save money. So because of that dynamic, the resale value of the solar panels is expected to greatly exceed the cost of removal. In other words, this $300,000 or whatever it is in the case of our specific project, it would be likely much more. That would be greater than the cost of simply removing those solar panels. So there's a financial incentive for the companies that own these things to do that. But at the end of the day, it is possible today to just simply recycle solar panels for if they were completely broken or anything like that. So you might also hear myths that you can't recycle solar panels, which is not true. We've done it before for the case where we've had a solar panel broken in the field during installation. So let's see, moving on to the next one. Another very common myth, and I'm telling you these specific myths because these are the ones that are very strong in your county, and your county commissioners latch onto these myths. So another myth is that decommissioning creates a financial risk to the county or its taxpayers. This one in particular is very, very present in all of our conversations with the county commissioners. So really simply put, I put in a little graphic here because it really is this simple. A community solar garden involves a private lease with a private landowner and a private developer. So here's where the lease lies, and this is actually who has the legal ability to decommission the project. But we do have to get a permit, and so that's kind of how the county gets involved. We have to get this use permit, conditional use permit, CUP. And the county has required a very large amount of money, at least $100,000 on day one, like before construction even starts, for the purpose of decommissioning, although they actually technically don't have the legal ability to decommission the project, and they're not part of this private agreement. So they're kind of stepping in. Well, you can see it however you want to see it. The way that I see it is that it's not necessary for the protection of the county because the county does not have a financial liability. They are not a party to this agreement. It's on private land and it's private equipment. There is one scenario in which the county could decommission the project itself. I don't think I need to get into it, but it's like an Armageddon scenario where everybody vanishes and stops paying taxes and the county exercises tax forfeiture and purchases the entire or gains the entire parcel, which would result in them being the new owner of a parcel with a market value of several $100,000. So not a very bad worst case scenario for the county. Another myth is that a solar project might be abandoned, in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. So there's some unique considerations about community solar. So again, I'm going to try not to go too deep into the weeds unless somebody wants me to on a specific item. But community solar is a weird business model, so it's worth understanding it a little bit. So we have contracts for at least 25 years for pretty much everything that makes up the project. So we have at least 25 years of site control or a lease with the landowner, at least 25 years of permit with the county. In Wright County, it's infinite. There's no limit on the number of years. We have a 25-year interconnection agreement with Excel. We have 25-year revenue contracts. So those subscription payments that I was talking about, those are 25-year agreements with the schools and cities, et cetera. 25-year operations and maintenance contracts, 25-year production warranty. We actually know the exact cost of the project prior to day one of operation. That's because we don't have to pay a human to shovel coal into a fire or anything like that. We just simply purchase the panels, install the system, and then it just quietly produces electricity. So there's not ongoing input costs, unlike every other form of electricity besides wind. And on top of that, we also know the exact revenue that we'll make per kilowatt hour for all 25 years due to those subscription agreements. So in other words, there's not a scenario in which the project would not be profitable and operational for at least 25 years. Yet again, the decommissioning fund is required upfront before the project even begins. And even if the project owner went bankrupt, the project itself, the solar farm, is structured in the same way that you would structure any sort of capital investment, like if you were to construct a shopping mall or a nuclear power plant or anything like that. And it's a special purpose entity. It's just that project company. So technically, if US Solar goes bankrupt, our project companies will not be financially impacted, and they could be purchased by US Bank or any other entity that wanted to own them. So that's a protection to the county and to everyone else that even if we do something stupid, the project itself is going to be unharmed. So another point here, just quickly, that there's a ton of community benefits that I've gone through and Lori's gone through. And very importantly, those all come for $0 in taxpayer funds. So another myth is that solar should be considered a commercial or industrial use. And I just love this picture. This is of my coworker, Erica, and her 2 kids at our solar farm. So I threw that in there. But if you think about a commercial or industrial use, it doesn't look anything like this. As you can see in this picture, there's no storefronts or permanent structures. There's no noise, odor, dust, lighting. There's no billboards. There are no utilities like sewer and water. There's no traffic. Instead, you just have a community solar garden that's covered almost entirely with pollinator-friendly habitat, just like the Conservation Reserve Program or CRP. And harvesting sunlight to generate electricity has been viewed as an agricultural use for quite some time in Minnesota and beyond. Just one example would be that the president of the Minnesota Farm Bureau has stated publicly that the Minnesota Farm Bureau statewide policy actually supports the development of community solar. as long as the drainage is maintained and serviced. And other groups, American Farm Bureau, Minnesota Farmers Union, National Farmers Union, have all endorsed the expansion of community solar. And simply put, those same groups don't go out of their way to support commercial or industrial uses like shopping malls or manufacturing plants. And there's a reason for that. There's a question about how solar projects are permitted and how they handle end of life in counties that develop a rational plan for solar use. So, like, how does this whole process work in a different county, in a county that's got this more under control? Well, in Stearns County, it's pretty interesting, actually, that Stearns County just recently adopted a new solar ordinance. And in their new solar ordinance, they say that 1 megawatt community solar gardens, which is what we're talking about here, are simply a permitted use. They are not conditional. You don't go to a public hearing. You don't talk to any county commissioners. You simply give them your site plan and your other engineering documents, and you tell them what parcel it's going to be on. And then the staff reviews that to make sure that you've met the criteria that they laid out. And if you have, then you get the permit. End of story. So that's pretty cool. I don't expect that Wright County will do that, although, it'd be in my best interest for them to do that. But that's just one interesting anecdote of something that's happened as recently as, I think that took effect in March of this year. But a conditional use permit is very common. The extremely problematic parts about Wright County, and I can talk about it a little bit more later, but the extremely problematic parts are this upfront decommissioning cost of over $100,000 that you just don't get back, or at least not until your project's decommissioned, which can be infinite amount of time according to their own permit. And then the requirement for a parcel to have a building entitlement or building eligibility for it to participate in community solar, which isn't based on anything and is not necessary, but it does restrict the vast majority of parcels in Wright County from participating. So yeah, usually you still go through a CUP process and the county board talks about it, but then at the end of the day, they have a very standard process for decommissioning. In Goodhue County, for example, they just say that the project owner and the project developer must have a decommissioning agreement. They say, look, I understand that I'm not involved here. You two got to figure this out, and that's a condition of your permit, but leave me out of it. So that's what I've recommended that Wright County adopt. So far, they have not been willing to consider that. I don't think they're likely to consider that. So at this point, what I'm hoping is that they'll at least allow the decommissioning surety to be funded over time, not prior to year one, for something that couldn't happen any sooner than year 25. Pretty bad use of money. So there are other counties that are amending their ordinances similar to Wright County in that, so what I mean is that there are counties who are, well, actually, I don't know if anyone has actually amended their ordinance like this, but there are counties that have increased their decommissioning surety requirement fairly recently. And this is when I said earlier that, some people or counties have opposition to solar that might be due to political reasons or whatever else. And then they look for something to use to sort of block those solar projects. This is, I think, the best example of that is this decommissioning argument. Because if you think about it, I mean, it's very, very difficult to estimate how much it's going to cost in 25 years to remove this project, but it's actually mathematically impossible to estimate how much it will cost to decommission this project at some unknown future point in time that is greater than 25 years. So again, it could be 100 years. We don't know the point in time, therefore making it mathematically impossible to estimate. And so they kind of just throw this in, and it's this really squishy, muddy thing that you can't very easily disprove because it's mathematically impossible. So that's something that we have seen in a couple other places where they make the surety requirement more expensive. But then on the other side of the spectrum, other places are taking it away entirely. So we're seeing different things in different counties in the state. newest question. Oops, sorry. Looks like we got a question about how many solar farms by private companies, as in not XL, are in Wright County currently. So, so in terms of solar farms developed by private companies, I think there are 12 in Wright County, which is not a tiny amount, but it's also not anywhere near a leading figure. So like Chisago County, I believe, is the most, and I think they have something like 50 or 60. That's the most in the state, or the highest number in a county in the state of Minnesota. So the ones in Wright County are, they have to be within XL Energy Service territory, and that's pretty much the best way I can answer the question of where are they, because there's community solar gardens in different locations. Then another question is the Association of Minnesota Counties on board as a supporter? I don't know. I'm not sure of that. Maybe somebody else at US Solar might know. If you have a connection, Chris, to the Association of Minnesota Counties, it might be worth an introduction or a quick conversation, and I'd be happy to talk with them. So there's a good question about how many projects are waiting for a permit, and then also, is any part of the moratorium lifted? Those are very similar questions, and I will answer them in just a second. I'm going to first show you this quick 50-second drone tour video, very, very fast. But the last thing that I was going to say on, these community solar gardens being an agricultural use is that we hear sometimes that, solar is going to take away from the role of agriculture in Wright County, which is frankly completely crazy. As I've said, they've permitted, I think, 12 community solar gardens. So just to put that in context, there are approximately 288,000 acres of farmland in Wright County, and each 1 megawatt solar garden, again, about 6 acres. So even if Wright County approved 400 new community solar gardens, that would use less than 1% of the farmland in the county. So it's never going to take away from agriculture. Agriculture is in no competition or no contest with solar in Wright County. So let's see if this works. I'm hoping the audio goes through as well, because it is narrated. Can we hear this?
Volume's very low. Can you turn it up?
David, if you go to the top of your screen, there's a little caret, downward caret. Under there, it says enable computer audio, and that's what you have to do to have your audio show on Zoom.
Oh.
Or if you stop sharing and go into share, there's a little button down in the left corner, I think, that says enable computer audio. So
I'll just narrate it myself. How's that?
Okay.
Okay,
Fine.
so this is a community solar garden that we developed. Again, this one's kind of near North Branch area. So this is a 1 megawatt solar array. You can see that it's on a farm field with corn. So what we've done is kind of set it back from the road a ways. And then this is roughly 4,000 solar panels. Again, 200 homes powered here, and the whole thing is covered in pollinator-friendly habitat. So half of this parcel is being used, half of this parcel uses the sun to cultivate corn, and the other half uses the sun to cultivate electricity. So you can kind of watch it just disappear from the road here. So this is something that pretty easily can give a rebuttal to the fact that people say solar is ugly, or every solar project I've ever driven past is so ugly. Well, that's a solar project that you wouldn't even know existed if you drove past it, because you literally cannot see it from the road. So I just like to show that as, not all solar projects are created equal. And now I will move on. Okay, we've got a question. When do projects need to be started so they can be completed this year, and how long does it take to complete? So in general, from the time that we sign a lease with the landowner until we're starting construction, is about a year. And during that year, we're working with Excel. We're paying them a bunch of money. They're doing some in-depth studies of, the electrical infrastructure that we need to connect to. We're working with the county to get our permits. We're doing environmental studies. We're doing all sorts of engineering and kind of getting ready for construction. That process, again, typically about a year. And then after that, once we actually begin construction, the physical construction is done in 7 weeks. And the noisiest part, or the most noticeable part of construction, which is the pile driving, those piles you can see, the steel I-beams here, that's done in a day and a half. So pretty fast, pretty low impact. And after that, there's some electrical commissioning work that takes place, and then we're operational. So the total time span is more like 18 to 24 months, depending on the project and if we have to wait a long time with Excel or not. Okay, I think this is my last myth here, which is that solar panels leach hazardous chemicals into the groundwater. This is simply false, and actually demonstrated to be false by the most credible group I could ever imagine. So this is a very comprehensive report that was done by the International Energy Agency. In short, that group is a global collaboration of over 6,000 experts. They analyzed the potential human health risks of solar panels, and specifically of the worst case scenario for solar panels. So what I mean by that is that they looked at if solar panels were just disposed of in a non-sanitary landfill with no stormwater management or groundwater monitoring. This is completely illegal, by the way. This would never happen. But this is how they studied it. And by analyzing those worst case conditions, they can show the maximum potential risk to human health associated with solar panels, even though the actual impact in Minnesota would be much lesser due to the strict regulation that we have here about such things. But in the report, they found no cancer risk, no water quality risk, no hazards to chemical concentrations in soil, groundwater, surface water, or air, no impact to human health whatsoever in the worst case scenario. So I do have a link in here, and I can share this presentation, or at least the links within it for you guys. There's a question about whether animals can graze underneath the panels. Yes, we are working on our first project to do so, which is going to be in Carver County. The best animal for that process is sheep, because goats kind of have a tendency to jump all over stuff and chew all over everything. So sheep, not so much, and they're not so large that they'll potentially bump into stuff that they're not supposed to. They love the habitat that we plant there. So yeah, we're working with a landowner who is a sheep farmer, and they're gonna allow their sheep to graze within the solar panels. We're doing the same thing in a site in Colorado as well. So Lori's asking about the next planning meeting, which is not until June 2nd. And do I think that we'll see solar development or permitting yet this year? Good question. Here, let me move on to the next slide, Wright County solar moratorium. So Wright County used to permit solar farms, kind of. They always had pretty restrictive requirements that were not entirely necessary, including that building eligibility and the high decommissioning surety. And then a moratorium was enacted where they actually increased that decommissioning surety. And so far it's still all up front. But they also, at the same time, they formed a working group, and they said, okay, let's get some stakeholders from the solar guys. Let's get some stakeholders from the county, from the vegetation side, and I think a couple landowners of projects. And so I am on that working group, and it has been a bumpy ride. It's been pretty, as Lori said, adversarial. I was accused of manipulating one of the commissioners accused me of manipulating him by simply providing evidence about solar, which is the exact purpose for me to be on the working group, and that's why he added me to it. So yeah, it's been a little bit adversarial, which is too bad. But I am seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. What they've done so far is they've clarified the minimum decommissioning surety amount to be $100,000. And so the intent is that soon they will allow projects that already have their approved permit to proceed. So I probably need to back up here because that might be confusing. What they did after approving our project, we have a project in Monticello Township, and it went through the whole process as it was supposed to. In December of last year, actually, they approved the conditional use permit. And then as we went to get our building permit, they just kind of didn't respond to our requests. And then after a while, they enacted this moratorium. And then they said, and by the way, your approved project is actually kind of being held hostage by this moratorium. So that was quite surprising to us. We'd never seen that done before. And so we're working with them to attempt to let that project go while they continue to consider any more changes to the moratorium. It looks like that's what they're going to do. I'm guessing around the end of this month that would take place. So that project would be allowed to proceed if it wants to pay $100,000 upfront for decommissioning. And then any project without an approved conditional use permit would still be prohibited according to the ordinance until they enact some new final ordinance. So it's kind of a two-phase process in Wright County. So let me see, what can you do to help? So first, I guess I should talk very, very quickly about those requirements. Again, the two restrictions. I guess, well, let me answer your question, Lori. Yeah, I think that our project that already has its CUP will get to proceed to construct this year, but we are already missing the construction season right now as we speak. So currently there's no crop being planted and it's just sitting there as idle ground, which is pretty unfortunate for the farmer who leased us his land. Yeah, and then for the other projects that don't have their CUPs, I think that the final ordinance likely will be passed this year, but if I had to guess, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months from now. And then so they would have to go back through that whole process, this whole CUP process at that time before advancing to construction. So what does the county intend to do with the surety bond? Yeah, so that's one of the two major restrictions that still exists that is hugely problematic. So I guess I'll just talk about it for a little bit. So even, it's not just that it's unnecessary, and I think I don't want to go beat a dead horse there, so I'll stop explaining that, but it's also just an atrocious way to use money. So you actually do pretty much just put this in a shoebox. They want a cash escrow in the amount of at least $100,000 put forth prior to day one of construction that will not be touched until the project is decommissioned, which can be an infinite amount of time because they don't have a sunset on their permits. So they explicitly prohibit bonds, cannot do bonds, which would obviously give us some level of relief if they would allow us to do bonds. There's no interest worth writing home about. In most cases, there's zero interest. So it's literally like you took $100,000, put it in a shoebox for a period of unknown time, at least 25 years, but up to infinity. And that's just a really bad way to use money. I mean, think of what could be accomplished with that money if it wasn't just handcuffed for 40, 50 years, whatever. We would very, very much prefer to, say, donate $5,000 every single year to the schools in the county. I would much rather do that than to put $100,000 in this account on day one and then just, set it in the shoebox and forget about it. but unfortunately, that's not currently a possibility. They're not open to that at this point. And it's also worth noting, US Solar probably sounds like a big company name. We're a local company. I was the 4th employee to work at US Solar. We've got about 30 full-time employees now. So it's still a small company and a local company. And to get $100,000 and put it in a shoebox is a very big lift. So, some companies like maybe Berkshire Hathaway, which owns a lot of solar projects, they have a market cap of 605 billion, billion with a B. They could probably set aside $100,000 and forget about it and not even notice. But that's not the case for local smaller companies like US Solar. And there's other ones out there too. I mean, at least 4 or 5 like US Solar that are based in Minnesota and actively developing projects like this. So our request to Wright County is simply to allow us to fund this. We gave up on saying forget about it and let us work with the private landowner because they weren't going for it. We gave up on trying to get the amount lower than $100,000 because they weren't going for it. So now my request to Wright County is, okay, at least allow us to fund this annually between years 1 and 25. So at that first point where there's maybe uncertainty, you'll have the full amount. So that's currently my request to get rid of that unnecessary restriction. And the other unnecessary restriction again is that you need a building eligibility on that parcel in order to apply for a solar CUP. Solar doesn't have any buildings, so there's not a legitimate need for that. And when we've asked Wright County about this, the commissioners have responded saying that, the quote that I got was not going to happen. And they went on to explain that cell towers and gravel pits also need building permits. So this is just fair treatment. But the obvious problem with that is that they're totally dissimilar. Solar doesn't have anything in common with a cell tower or a gravel pit. A cell tower is visible from over a mile away. A gravel pit's loud and dusty, causes a lot of big rig traffic. Solar's passive and quiet and odorless and good for the environment. So our request there is simply to eliminate that requirement. And it does currently, the vast majority of parcels in Wright County do not have a building eligibility. So that would make a big difference. So what you can do to help, if you'd like, if you think this is, and there's a question about, is the $100,000 fee illegal? I don't believe it is illegal because counties and local governments unit get a lot of deference in terms of what they can require for their permitting. But there is a question of the legality of them using any of the money. Can Wright County actually take dollars out of an account and enter private property to remove private equipment? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but there's certainly a question mark there. And we have raised that point to the county that they may not even have the legal authority to do this. So the money might be there for absolutely zero purpose if they don't have the legal authority to actually use it. It's simply, I mean, its effect is just a disincentive for solar companies to do business in Wright County because they're going to go to Stearns County or they're going to go to Goodhue County, which doesn't have any decommissioning surety requirement. They're going to go to Redhue County, which doesn't have any decommissioning surety requirement. Why would they do business in Wright County where the company will make exactly $100,000 fewer than if they just took their business to a different county? So it is a closed for business sign. It's something saying it's just a barrier to entry. So if your goal is to have more solar, then a large upfront decommissioning requirement is directly the enemy. That's what's going to drive down the number of new solar farms. So what you can do is to directly reach out to your county commissioner and township board member. And I've included those commissioners. I also have like a link to the commissioner maps. So you can, if you don't know who your commissioner is, or I'm sure like Lori or Renee would probably be able to help out with that as well. They, for a while, their tune was that they have not heard that people really care about community solar. And then that has changed fairly recently. And now they're saying, we know that people want community solar, but look, we like community solar. We're not trying to shut down community solar. But the truth is that the existing conditions that they're considering, and they're about to enact this moratorium, which once they do so, it's going to stay there for a long time. I've worked in a lot of different counties, and anytime that they've enacted their solar ordinance within the last 4 years, if you try to change anything about it, they just go, no, we just looked at that. We spent a long time. We talked about it a lot. We're not going to reopen that can of worms. So right now is the time, and whatever they enact is going to be here for, I would say, at least 4 years, probably a lot more like 10. So if they come out with this building eligibility requirement, and they come out with the decommissioning surety requirement of $100,000 up front for that period of time, you're just going to see a lot less solar. So if we can have, their own constituents coming up to them or emailing them or calling them and saying, hey, I've been educating myself on this issue. It sounds like I'm taking crazy pills, but I think more solar is a good thing and not a bad thing. So, hey, why are you making it harder to do solar in Wright County and not easier? Specifically, here's these two things that I've heard about that I want you to get rid of. And generally speaking, I want you to know that I'm your constituent and I want you to enact a pro-solar policy, something that's friendly to solar development here. So I do have an email template that I drafted that I could either email out to the people on the call, or I could send it to Renee and she could distribute it, or I'm not sure how you guys want to do that, but I do have that at your disposal if you'd like to contact your commissioners and need some help on what to say.
So David, if I could just add into that a little bit, we're going to have on Monday, next Monday, a conversation. I don't know if everyone who's here can make it next Monday. And we're going to talk about how county government works. And then we're going to look at solar and how people could take action with solar. So definitely send me your email.
Okay.
And then folks, anybody, I'll talk a little more about that next Monday meeting after David is done. But if anybody needs that email that he sends me before then, or you're not going to be able to make it to the meeting, let me know. But
When
we're
did you
going
say
to
that
definitely
was?
follow up
When did you say that was, Renee?
next Monday
Okay, good. Yeah.
at 7.
And Renee,
So-
we can put that on our Thursday blast for those people who can't make it.
Yeah.
That would be really good to do. So
That's-
Yeah,
the
and we're
information
also
will-
we're also gonna just really kind of talk to the we're really gonna talk to the point that the commissioners don't seem to understand. Well, they don't seem to be using an effective process with this whole situation. They seem, it's almost as though they don't know what to do. And I don't know if it's because they're deliberately wanting to be obstructionists or they just are not prepared for their job real well. But there's, I like honestly get off the meeting sometimes and think, wow, they're just really incompetent. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the impression they're giving me because they keep saying miss and they keep, they're just not using an effective process by any standard of any means that I've ever seen in any place. So we're gonna ask questions about that too. Like, how do you train your commissioners? How do you, so we really want to, because we're here in Wright County for the long term. Solar is one issue, but how are they handling others? How are they handling broadband? How are they handling, road development? Are they really using good processes for making decisions for us here in the county? Or are they just kind of, going off from what they think is right? So I won't say any more than that, but yes, more to come.
David, if you wanted to wrap up, and I think some people have questions yet, so you want to wrap up your
Yeah.
presentation and then we can take questions, please.
Yeah, sure. So I think that what Renee said is spot on, and just as a piece of context that might be useful for you, and basically to answer the question, what are they thinking? So one of the commissioners, one of the two commissioners on this group, without naming them, I asked about, I guess why he found I was being unreasonable, and he was explaining his own perspective, and he was saying that his number one goal is to find the middle ground. And when he says that, he's talking about between the solar haters and the solar lovers. He's saying that I've got to do something that's going to not entirely piss off both ends of this group. Okay, so rather than saying, I'm going to listen to the evidence and I'm going to do the thing that is best for Wright County, he is trying to be in the middle of two groups that feel very differently, which is going to create an outcome that's not actually productive for either group. So that's kind of how he's approaching it. And, that's not what, I don't think that's what you guys want. I don't think you guys want someone who's trying to find the middle ground, because the middle ground is at best mediocrity, but probably it's going to create an ordinance that's problematic and you're not going to see solar development. So thank you. I think that's all I had. So at this time, I know Chris rose her hand, and anyone else, please feel free to ask any questions.
Well, the reason I raised my hand is I had run for state representative back in 2006, 8, and 10. And in one of my, and then state senate just in the last election, in the candidate forum, at that time, Amy Koch was the candidate and incumbent state senator. And the questions were coming up about coal energy and oil. And her family is in the energy business. And she said, coal is, clean now. And she was promoting fossil fuels, and it's clean and safe. And then I pointed out that my husband's grandmother lost 2 husbands to coal mining accidents. So the questions of safety were a little bit, I took issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
But given how on this policy and others, and I'd actually raised my hand when I heard Renee speaking, as I look at the decision making that has come around COVID and masks and so many other issues, is they are bringing in these quasi so-called experts on these topics and listening to these bizarre non-science-based opinions about various issues that they seem to go out and research an expert that'll tell them what they want to hear based upon the policies they want to keep in place. And then they spread that misinformation around to the rest of them. And that I've seen that happen enough that, it's very difficult for me to give them the benefit of the doubt on their policies and process. I know that we need to, and I know that we need to go in and presume that they want to do the best for Wright County and educate on these topics. But I've seen way too much evidence to the contrary that they're cherry picking experts that'll tell them what they want to hear because they don't want to proceed for other reasons. And I'm finding that a lot in some of the constituent base as well, as they've got a reason not to want to do this. It has nothing to do with whether it's viable, whether it's safe. They don't want to do it, and all they're trying to find reasons and believing things that are not based in science or fact in order to support their position. So it's very challenging to beat your head against the wall when that's what we're up against. But hopefully meetings like this, where we're educating the other constituents and do more with our access to the press and letters to the editor and other access to try to educate our other community members. And maybe we could put on, host a couple of public forums where we bring in the public to talk about this, because we need to get a critical mass of people who support it to get the elected officials to back down on some of these ridiculous restrictions. So I will step back and let others have the floor here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Other questions or comments for David?
I just have a comment. And it goes along the lines of Renee and talking about, and I kind of hate to say this, but it is incompetence. If you watch the commissioner meetings, so this surety that went along with the ordinance, I talked to Mike Katzmark, who put that together. And he calls quite frequently, and we, don't always agree on much of anything, but still, he still calls. Those were just like targets. I mean, there was no research, there was no logic to those numbers. He just used those to build a template on, just an idea of what those numbers might be. At the next commissioners meeting, in the last literally 3 minutes of that meeting, they decided they'd just approve that ordinance. I am positive that the commissioners did not read that ordinance, other than Mike, who wrote it. They said, oh, what's it about? Blah, blah, blah. This was, I know David, David asked for the ordinance at the last planning meeting and they couldn't find it. And they never gave it to the solar people. I'm the one that sent an email over to David because they were just fumbling around like, I don't know what we did with it. This is the document that they wrote to say that, this is what you've got to pay. And they are just adamant about, nope, we have to have every dime of that before you start the project. They don't even know that those numbers make any sense. And Mike himself said, they're just numbers I put here because we had to have, he never planned that those would be the numbers. He was just trying to build a template. It's just, if you get a chance to watch a commissioner meeting, there's one commissioner that's so out of control. I can't, and he was so rude last time. And I don't know whether he's having a bad ADD day or what, but he was just ridiculous and insulting. And at one point he just started like throwing things around and saying he lost his patience. And he's, I've had to call Lee Kelly about him and say, that's not how I want a commissioner to act.
I have a feeling that's my county commissioner.
Probably. Probably.
I've dealt with him before.
Yeah, it's just, and so the solar people come in and they're trying to have a rational conversation with people that have done no research, don't have any idea about what they're talking about. And we really do have to start, doing what David and Renee are saying. You need to get back to your commissioners and tell them. In fact, on every chat meeting with the last time I said, Vetch, have you researched, whoops, I shouldn't have said that, but whatever. Have you researched anything? Do you know what you're talking about? Where are you getting your facts? And anyway, I know I'm really super frustrated, but they don't do research. I don't know what they're going to do with broadband because I don't know that they know anything about solar, and they're making all these crazy decisions. Now they want to look and see if there's thistles that are growing underneath the solar panels. That's absurd. They want to put some sort of barrier on the solar garden because they think they're ugly. It's absurd. It's gone. It's just like, yeah.
Well, and I think, Lori, it's one thing to say it's absurd, but it's also really bad business. And I'm the last person to talk about business, I'm not a business person, but I can plainly see it's bad business. There are farmers who are trying to save their farms who want to put solar panels up so they can have a revenue stream. There are companies that are Minnesota-based companies wanting to do business in Wright County. There are employees who want to be hired and work in Wright County that can't get hired because of this. In every sense of the word, it's bad business and it's an overstep. I hate to even say this, but it's an overstep of government.
Right.
And it's just shocking to have our county commissioners, who I don't think are considering themselves liberal, to be overstepping and overusing government in the way they're overusing government. And it's just, it's outstandingly poor decision-making. The other thing that impacts every single one of us is that in the last meeting, we didn't even talk about property taxes, but in the last meeting, the county commissioners have the right to change the property tax classification of the land in which solar panels are on. And the US Solar would pay the higher property tax rate. And the county commissioners said, no, we don't want to change it. We don't want that extra tax dollar money coming in.
Yeah,
So
the tax assessor is the one who said, nope, I'm not changing it. I did it once. I'm not going to do it again.
Yep.
I thought I looked that up though, and I think that they're rated different. I think the state rates it different. There's agriculture and then there's solar, or there's agriculture with solar. And it's supposed to be twice the amount of tax. I think it's a state guideline on it.
No, taxes are managed by the county commissioners, and they can decide what the land use is classified for.
Yeah.
So they're keeping this land use classified as agricultural, which is one of the lowest tax rates.
They're saying agriculture without solar or without utility base.
Yep. They can make that decision. They don't have to follow the state mandate.
Oh my
or
God.
the state.
Because they would get
recommendation.
twice the amount of tax from it.
Yes.
if they did it.
Yes.
Yes, but the tax assessor said, nope, he didn't want to do it.
And I've never found myself in a position where I'm trying to convince the county to charge me higher taxes. But that's what happened. And I tried, I was unsuccessful. It is actually a sort of gray area in the law. The state basically, because it's governed by state law, it says that there's this thing called the production tax, which applies to like huge, massive projects. And it specifically does not apply to anything that's 1 megawatt or smaller. So community solar being limited at a maximum of 1 megawatt, there's no overlap between community solar and this thing called the production tax. So that's where they are getting confused. And the law also says that, well, long story short, the gray area is that you have to change the tax classification if it's this greater than 1 megawatt and paying production tax. If it is 1 megawatt and not paying production tax, it's silent. You can or you cannot. And so that's where Wright County has decided that they're not doing it. Other counties have decided that they are doing it. We are paying higher taxes in other counties than we do in Wright County. And we are willing to pay the higher taxes, but they haven't charged us more. And then they also turn around and say, well, these solar projects aren't paying higher taxes, even though we're sitting there telling them that they have the legal authority to, and we're willing to do it.
Judy, you had a question, I think, for David?
Oh, darn.
Yes. Well, I don't know if it's for David or Renee, but well, there's one is how do we get on their agenda? Another point is if we know people who want community solar, do we need to generate a petition? And you may have already talked about these kind of things. I don't know, but to me, their meetings are open to the public, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So if we could get on their agenda, then we could bring a lot of people.
The solar planning meetings are not open to the public. They're
Of
private.
course not. Why?
The board meetings of the whole county commissioners are open to the public, and you can bring forward a question if you submit it earlier. So I think, Judy, you've got excellent ideas, and I think that's what we're going to talk about next week. So I really encourage people to come, because we'll have a little presentation on county government to explain it better, and then we will delve into some of these actions that we can take and how can we really make this work. And part of it is we need to get people riled up about this. It's ridiculous. It's costing us money.
Hey, why is the solar one private when the open meeting laws?
It isn't private. You can ask to, I go to all the planning meetings. So if somebody wants to go, I can send you the link. And you're
That's open
you're
meeting law,
supposed to
that
be an
should not
observer,
be private.
but
It's only got 2 of the county commissioners in it, so it does not have to be public for everybody to be at. If 3 or more county commissioners are in a meeting, then it has to be publicly open. So we can attend and observe, but we cannot ask, be part of the conversation.
But you
Oh,
can
that
do
was
chat.
good.
You can chat, and if you want the link, I can get you the link.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lori's been getting in the links to get us in.
Yeah,
David, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. Your information was invaluable. I think we all learned a whole lot, and hopefully
Yeah.
we can, hopefully we can make a change somehow. It'd be awesome. So thank you again for your time, and I will send that to you to have you check it with your boss. Renee, do you want to talk any more about next week's meeting? Or
I think I've said enough about it, but does anybody have questions about it?
did you already send that link out?
no, have not sent the link out. It will be sent out on Monday. I will
Right.
send out
Okay.
an invitation or notice about it,
You know
but
what I
the
mean.
links go out
Yeah.
on Monday.
It's at 7 PM, in case you didn't catch that. We try
Okay.
to keep it to an hour.
David,
Um,
good luck with County Commissioner number 2. That's mine.
Thank you. Yeah,
I've
thanks very
dealt with
much.
him politically for years.
So,
Yeah.
we'll see- Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Next
Thank you,
month,
David.
everybody, we have
Thank you
Jay
all.
Weatherford from the Wright County, the Executive Director of Community Action, and receiving more information about that. Ann's been able to pull him in, so that's another interesting, good conversation, a discussion, presentation that we will see. Thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. Yeah, if we don't have anything else, I think it's time to go.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
Sue.
Thank you.